Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodhanandana Braja Jana Rajana Jasodhanandana Braja Jana Rajana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari. Jai. Jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, we'll be reading from the 10th canto, chapter 40, verse 10. We'll be reading the Sanskrit, the translation purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta. Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yatadri Prabhava Nadyaha Parjanya Purita Prabhu Vishanti Sarvata Sindhum Tatvatvam Gatayontata Yatadri Prabhava Nadyaha Parjanya Purita Prabhu Vishanti Sarvata Sindhum Tadvatvam Gatayo Antataha Yatadri Prabhava Nadyaha Parjanya Purita Prabhu Vishanti Sarvata Sindhum Tadvatvam Gatayo Antataha. Hare Krishna, you could chant. Yatadri Prabhava Nadya Parjanya Purita Prabhu Shitsi Sarvata Sindhum Tadvat Swam Gatayo Antahat Yatadri Prabhava Nadyaha Parjanya Parita Prabhu Vishansi Sarvata Sindhum Tadvat Swam Gatayo Antata. Okay. Yata as Adri from the mountains. Prabhavaha born. Nadyaha rivers. Parjanya by the rain. Apurditaha filled. Prabho, O Master. Vishanti enter. Sarvataha from all sides. Sindhum the ocean. Tatvat similarly. Twam you. Gatsayaha these pass. Antataha finally. Translation. As rivers born from the mountains and filled by the rain flow from all sides into the sea, so do all these paths in the end reach you, O Master. Purport. Lord Krishna himself speaks on this issue of worship in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verses 23 through 25. Yapiyanya devata. What's the meter? Yapiyanya devata bhakta yajante shradayam vitaha teapi mam eva konteya yajanti avidya purvakam aham hi sara yagnanam bhokta cha prabho eva cha natsumam abhijanansi tatvinatas chavanti te yanti deva brata devam pitrim yanti pitri brataha Bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti ma yagyano apimam. Quote, those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti. But they do so in a wrong way. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. Amagyan Samanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumiletam Yena Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kapatirubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavenebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhattacharya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, we'll be reading again the translation from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 40, verse 10. As rivers born from the mountains and filled by the rain flow from all sides into the sea, so do all these paths in the end reach you, O Master. Hare Krishna, thank you everyone for coming today. Here's a disclaimer. I'm not an expert at giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, but I am an expert at criticizing, slandering, and offending devotees. That's my expertise. So I'd like to thank all the devotees who allowed me to do that over the years. And somehow or other, Subal Prabhu, I have to especially thank you. Somehow or other, despite offending you so many years, you allowed me to give Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'm very grateful for that. And thank you for all the senior devotees too, Mother Krishna Archana, and Daniel Prabhu too, also, and other devotees who may come later. I would like to start with, first of all, before I get to the subject matter of this chapter title, the sequence of that I plan on going to, because to tell you the truth, I had less than 48 hours to prepare, and most of those 48 hours was washing pots. So I literally prepared maybe half hour before the class. So hopefully I could do some justice to it and not embarrass myself and especially embarrass all those who have kindly given their love and affection and wisdom to me over the years, my Shiksha Gurus, Diksha Gurus, etc. So, I'd like to start with a very important, one of my, I think it's the most important lesson, one of the most important lessons in my life and in general, my personal opinion, that's spoken by Srila Prabhupada. This is spoken in Prabhupada's purport in the 7th Canto, Chapter 5, verse 12. He says, "We should not be very proud of our own service, but we should appreciate the service of others." And so, you know, I'll take this moment. There's many devotees I appreciate over the years. First, I'd like to begin with, of course, my mother, my brother, His Grace Jaya Jagannath Prabhu, and Jitendriya. And Mother Rohini, she's like a second mother to me. But I also like to, you know, highlight some other devotees. There's too many devotees to really highlight, but I'll just like to, you know, first of all, thank Subal Prabhu and his wife, Mother Krishna Archana. I think they came around the first time when I came around 2005. I came a little 2003, but I consistently started to come in 2005. And while I was here in Chicago, His Holiness Rama Maharaj sent them to Naperville to build the community up in there. I didn't know they didn't have a temple, but Subal Prabhu and Mother Krishna Archana Mataji was very instrumental in building that community up, especially the youth. So thank you for that. And I'm sure the youth are very grateful. Now I feel like I'm getting old because I saw them grow up. It's been since 2004, 2005, now it's 2021. There's also, there's many other devotees to be grateful for, but maybe I'll share a little bit of that gratitude after class. So the title of this chapter is called The Prayers of Akrura. And let me open my notes here. So, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj says, Shravanam Kirtana Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. That one of the limbs of bhakti is vandana, prayers. And it's a very important limb of bhakti. And so I'd like to start with one very powerful quote in this regard to set the, you could say, tone of the Srimad Bhagavatam class today. And so this quote is by Leonard Ravenhill. He says, "No man is greater than his prayer life. The pastor who is not praying is playing. The people who are not praying are straying. We have many organizers, but few agonizers. Many players and payers, few prayers. Many singers, few clingers. Lots of pastors, few wrestlers. Many fears, few tears. Much fashion, little passion. Many interferers, few intercessors. Many writers, but few fighters. Failing here, we fail everywhere." And so, as previously mentioned, Prahlad Maharaj says that one of the limbs of bhakti, the 9 processes of bhakti, of course, there's many categories you can mention of bhakti, like the 5 most potent forms mentioned by Rupa Goswami. Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagava Shrava Mathura Vashrimutir Shadayan Sevan. That the most powerful forms of bhakti is associating with devotees, Sadhu Sangha, chanting the holy name, Nama Kirtan, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which we're doing today, Bhagava Shrava, residing in the holy place, Mathura Vas, and worshiping the deity, Srimutir Shadayan Sevan. And so there are many categories that can be described, but we'll focus on what Prahlad Maharaj says. He says one of the 9 processes of bhakti is vandana, offering prayers. Now, what's the purpose of offering prayers? It's to protect us from the flood of the threefold miseries that's imposed on all of us. What are the threefold miseries? Adhyatmika, Adibautika, and Adidaivika. Adhyatmika refers to miseries um, um, that come from our body and our mind. Adibautika means miseries that come from other living entities. And Adidaivika means miseries that come from natural disasters, too much cold, too much rain, too much heat, drought, etc., ultimately controlled by the demigods. So we all have a flood of difficulties in our life, and the tendency is that when we don't have difficulties, when we don't have a flood of difficulties in our life, then we don't have this tendency to pray, like Okura or many other devotees in the scriptures. And so a flood of difficulties are a very great blessing because they, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, they bring us closer to the Lord. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that part of, he uses an analogy in chapter 4, verse 36, that building our bhakti is compared to building a ship or a boat. He says in chapter 4, verse 36, even if one is considered the greatest sinner of sinners, if he is situated on a boat of transcendental knowledge, he will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. And so this is one of my favorite analogies, actually, and reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. One of them says, ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. We can't stop everything on the outside, opposition, criticism, rumors, or traffic, but if we allow what's on the outside to get on the inside, then we'll sink into depression, fear, anger, and vengeance. So there's also a very nice one. It's actually written by a Christian. He used the word Christian in it, but I'll make it more universal. He says, people should live in a world, but not be filled with it. A ship lives in the water, but if the water gets into the ship, she sinks. So people may live in a world, but if the world gets into them, they sink. Samsara sindum ati dushanam utita shor nanya plavo bhagavata purushotamasa lila kata rasini shevanam antarena. This verse from the Bhagavatam, Canto 12, chapter 4, verse 40, it says, if you want to cross this sindum, even this verse mentions the word sindum, ocean. If you want to cross, so this verse says sindum, if you want to cross this ocean of samsara, what does that mean? Birth and death, and all the drama that comes along with it. If you want to cross this ocean, then you have to build a plava. Plava means boat, and what is this boat composed of? Lila katarasini shevanam antarena, the nectarian pastimes of Krishna. And what's the purpose of hearing the pastimes of Krishna? Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatiya kenchana sarva gunais tatra samasate suraha. This verse, Prabhupada will often quote from the 5th Canto, chapter 18, verse 12. The purpose of hearing Krishna's pastimes is ultimately meant to develop good qualities. And what's the purpose of the good qualities? They're meant to keep what's on the outside, the ocean of negativity, from getting on the inside. So just like humility, tolerance, forgiveness. Take forgiveness. Forgiveness, what is that purpose? It's meant to keep this negativity, this vengeance, this ocean of forgiveness from getting on the inside. And so the Bhagavatam, there's a nice other verse in this regard. It says, Shreyasam niya sarvesham, gyanam ni shreyasam param, sukham tarati dushparam, gyanaur vyasanarnavam. It says, Shreyasam, the highest achievement. Shreyasam means, what's the highest achievement? Well, everyone has their notion, but it says the highest achievement in this world is Gyan Naor. Gyan Naor means the boat of knowledge. And this is from the 4th Canto, chapter 24, verse 75. It says the highest achievement in this world is Gyan Naor. Now, if you ask a mathematician what knowledge is, for them it's math. If you ask a biologist, biology. A chemist, chemistry. If you ask LeBron James, it's basketball. That's knowledge to them. So everyone has their conception of knowledge and what's the highest achievement in life. However, we learn from the Gita that there's two forms of knowledge: primary knowledge and secondary knowledge. Secondary knowledge means mathematics, chemistry, biology, basketball, this, that. But Krishna says in chapter 13, verse 8 through 12 of the Gita, that primary knowledge means what? Good qualities, beginning with humility. Now, why is this very important? Because it doesn't matter what type of occupation you have. Everyone experiences a flood of difficulties. What is that flood of difficulties? You're ignored, you're insulted, you're criticized, you're misunderstood, you're misjudged. People spread rumors about you. So it doesn't matter what occupation you go. Everyone gets honor and dishonor, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. However, if you haven't built this boat of knowledge, this boat of good qualities, then let's say you're a mathematician. Let's say somebody receives a promotion above you unfairly. So how will you respond to their circumstances? X equals Y over 2? No. Unless you develop good qualities, then you'll respond to the situation with anger, with vengeance, with envy. And so if you're a chemist and somebody criticizes you, what will you respond with? The periodic table of elements? No, unless you built this boat of knowledge, the boat of good qualities, then we could see practically in our own life, we get ourselves in a lot of trouble. And so this is the importance of offering prayers and developing these good qualities so we could remain steady in our life. So in this regard, there's this nice story from the Holy Bible of Noah's Ark. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Jaya. Noah's Ark. Once upon a time, God went to his devotee named Noah, and he says, "My dear Noah, you have a mess. There's a great flood coming to destroy all of mankind. Here's the message. Build an ark, a ship, so that you and your family will survive." So in the Gita, Krishna tells us the same thing, and life tells us the same thing. Dukkha layam ashashvatam. We all have a mess. And what is that mess? There's a flood of difficulties coming in our own life. What's the message? Build character, build humility, build tolerance, so that your peace of mind will stay afloat, your relationships will stay afloat, and ultimately your career will stay afloat, and our relationship with God will stay afloat. And so this is the importance of offering prayers with devotion. And so the other point we would like to discuss today is how prayers could become very, or any devotional process, any ritualistic process can be very ritualistic. So what happens when we do something every day? It's nice when we first come to Krishna consciousness, right? But hypothetically speaking, suppose pizza is your favorite food. And I remember the first time when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. I don't know who took me, not my mother, but we went on some field trip to Pizza Hut. That was the first time I ever went to Pizza Hut, and I'll never forget it. And I was like, what the heck is this substance here? I didn't know what it was. That was the first time I ever had pizza, and I'll never forget. Of course, I don't go to Pizza Hut anymore, but I'm just remembering. I go downstairs where devotees made pizza, but I never forget the first time I had pizza. I didn't know what it was, and I was so enlivened. But over the years, the more you have pizza, if you had to have pizza every day, it'll make you sick to your stomach, right? So the lesson, basically, when we hear these prayers of every day, the prayers of Akrura, the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, we may say, oh, the prayers of Akrura, they sound a lot like the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. Krishna's God, be humble, I surrender to you. Then you go to the prayers of Queen Kunti, same thing. You go to the prayers of Lord Brahma, same thing. So in this way, when we read the Bhagavatam, even in Prabhupada's books, he kind of repeats the same things over and over again. You're not this body, you're a spirit soul, be humble, chant the holy name. Next page, same thing. It's like copy and paste, copy and paste. So it's easy to become very ungrateful, but Prabhupada says something very important in the Gita, chapter 2, verse 25. He says repetition of something is very necessary. Why? So we'll learn the lessons so we can learn the lessons and learn them so that for lack of a better word, for lack of proper remembrance, he says repetition is necessary so that we can remember it properly. Because the tendency in Kali Yuga especially, we have the tendency to forget these lessons. I mean, we speak about forgiveness, humility, appreciation every day, but what happens when somebody insults us? I don't forgive you, I'm gonna kill you. Same thing, we hear about it every day, so that means the lesson is not going in. That's why we hear it every day. And so also we're supposed to be practicing sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti means, sadhana means practice. There's a saying, practice makes perfect. Can you learn how to ride the bike if you only practice once? Can you learn how to play the piano if you only practice once? So therefore, it's important to hear these lessons every day. And the dangerous part of becoming familiar with the prayers, like beyond grateful, because we hear the same prayers, the similar prayers every day, is that this could also be applied to devotee association. Wow, I see the same devotees every day. At first, when I came to the temple, it was so enlivening. But there's a saying, familiarity breeds contempt, and that's one flood of difficulty. We all have flooded difficulties in life, and one flood that causes us to ultimately leave Krishna consciousness, either internally or ultimately externally, is familiarity or ingratitude. And so it's described that we should subdue this enemy, this inner demon known as familiarity, ingratitude, or attitude. We should subdue this with gratitude. And so there's many devotees to be grateful for, but there's a nice lesson in this regard of how we subdue our inner demons. So in the Nectar of Instruction, the first lesson of Rupa Goswami is Vacho Vegam Manasa Krodha Vegam. That in order to be a proper leader, not ultimately for others, but how to lead ourselves, is that we have to subdue the tongue. And what gets us in a lot of trouble? Familiarity. And so the more we're familiar with devotees, then we don't see their greatness. So there's a nice story in this regard of subduing the tongue. Once upon a time, a father wanted to teach his 18-year-old son, Jason, a lesson on taming the tongue. Why? Because all throughout Jason's life, he was always the most popular kid. He was a straight-A student, and he was the star athlete on his basketball team. Consequently, Jason became very proud by thinking, I can say anything to anyone and get away with it. But his father warned him. He says, my dear Jason, it doesn't matter how powerful we are or how powerful we think we are, we can always be humbled by Almighty God. But Jason, like most teenagers, did not listen to his father. But circumstances would eventually humble him the hard way. Indeed, during Jason's freshman, sophomore, and junior year in high school, he always made the basketball team. But during his senior year, he got cut from the team. Why? Because his best friend, Eric, told him that the new basketball coach for his senior year was the father of one of the students he bullied all throughout high school. So the moral of the story is, just as criminals who escape from prison will cause problems for all of human society, so when our bad qualities escape from us through our words and our actions, they cause problems for us and potentially for others. How does the government subdue criminals? Very easy, with security guards. So it's described in all universal spiritual teachings that a wise person subdues pride with humility, envy with appreciation, vengeance with forgiveness, and attitude with gratitude. And so, unless we subdue this inner demon, attitude, or familiarity, not seeing the greatness of devotees because we spent so much time with them, then we can see it gets us in a lot of trouble. And I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised it hasn't gotten me in trouble yet, but hopefully it's not coming, because I'm like screaming at devotees all the time. So, but Krishna knows our heart. I love everyone, so Krishna knows our heart. So. But this is a very important lesson. So therefore, there's a nice verse in the Bible, in the book of James, chapter 3. It says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My dear brothers and sisters, this should not be. Archayam eva hareye pujam yashadaye hate nata bateshu chanyeshu sabata prakata shmitaha. This is a verse from the 11th Canto of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada quotes this in the Nectar of Instruction, text 5. This verse says Even if one does archaryam, deity worship, or worship of God or the guru, but he does not properly show respect to devotees, or even people in general, that person is considered a materialistic devotee, and you get yourself in a lot of trouble when these anarthas escape from us. So we're meant to subdue. Not only are we meant to subdue, because I was very confused when I first read the verse of the Nectar of Instruction, where Rupa Goswami says that the first lesson in becoming a leader for yourself is Vacho Vegam, subduing the tongue, and then Manasa Krodha Vegam, then subduing the mind. I was very confused about that because I was thinking that in the Gita, Krishna says that everything begins and ends within the mind, because whatever we're thinking about is manifest, generally speaking, in our words. Like there's a nice quote that says, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, it becomes your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Savaimana Krishna Pada Ada Vindayor Vachamsi Vaikunta Gunana Vanane. Prabhupada always quote this verse in regards to Ambarish pastime, because Savaimana Krishna, because Ambarish's mind, the mind of Krishna, was always meditating on Krishna, then what was the result? Vachamsi, Vacho Vegam, the same word. Vachamsi, he spoke about Krishna. Because he spoke about Krishna, then he acted in Krishna consciousness in so many ways. So the reason I was confused about this verse from the Nectar of Instruction is that I was thinking that I think Rupa Goswami made a mistake, because Manasa Vegam, the urge to think, should be first, because whatever we're thinking, then it's usually manifests in our words. However, I'll tell a short personal story. I'm teaching one Mataji's young son, Mridanga. Recently, she asked me to teach her son, and her son also has another Mridanga teacher. And so the mother just told me that after the first lesson he had with me, I taught him one rhythm. And so he actually went to his other Mridanga teacher. And the child told his other Mridanga teacher, he says, my new Mridanga teacher is better than you. I already know a rhythm. That's what he said. And so she said a very profound point. She says, children have no filters. Whatever they're thinking comes to the mind. So in this way, I kind of understood why Rupa Goswami says, Vacho Vegam. We should first subdue the tongue, put some filters on our tongue, put what is it called? What is that thing dogs wear to subdue their mouth? What is that thing? Daniel, what is that thing dogs wear? Like a muzzle. We're all meant to put muzzle. So Rupa Goswami put this muzzle on yourself, and we see children have no filters. They have no muzzle. But you can't scream at a child. So my whole point is that first we're supposed to subdue our tongue, but ultimately in the final analysis, whatever we're thinking about, so therefore Rupa Goswami says, Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam. Yes, first subdue your tongue, and naturally when you become an adult, you become expert at that. But it's much harder to subdue your mind, because the tendency is, if nobody can see me, if nobody can hear me, my thoughts, then the tendency is not to subdue your mind. But what we could see, practically experience, is that if you don't subdue your thoughts, then eventually you'll make yourself miserable. There's a nice saying. A wise man was once asked, what is anger? And the response he gave was this: anger is a punishment we give ourselves for somebody else's mistake. And so we can see that if you have any animosity towards others, you're just harming yourself in the end, and potentially you may harm others. So there's also Aristotle. He says a nice quote. He says, the wicked man cannot be in the position of a friend, even toward himself, because he has nothing in himself which can incite the sentiment of friendship. It is man's duty to flee from wickedness with all his might and strive to be good, and thus may he come to be a friend to himself, and then may he come to be a friend to another. So before we could be a friend to others, we have to first be a friend to ourselves, and this is the message of the Nectar of Instruction. First, we have to subdue the tongue and then subdue the mind. So in this way, I'll share maybe a few other points in this regard. And then maybe for the last point, I'll actually get to the purport. And this is a very important lesson regarding how great the devotees are. It doesn't matter. I would prefer screaming at devotees all day long than going out in the material world. So however bad your association with devotees is a million times better than associating with anyone in the material world. So I'm very grateful for devotees who allow me to express my inner arts until I become more mature in my Krishna consciousness. But here's a very important lesson. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 18, verse 13, it's a very nice verse, one of my favorite ones all time. It says, Harir hi saksha bhagavan shadidinam amajashanam ivato yam ipsitam hitwamam samyadi sajate griye tadam mahatvam vayasata patinam. It says there are two people in this world, those who stay in Krishna consciousness and those who stray from Krishna consciousness. So it describes why we should stay and not stray from Krishna consciousness. It gives a good analogy. Jashanam, aquatics. It says just as a shark who stays in the ocean is powerful, and a shark who strays from the ocean is powerless. So if we stay in the ocean of Krishna consciousness, we remain powerful. If we stray, we become powerless. So in this regard, there's a nice compare and contrast story between a sincere devotee named Haridas Thakur and an insincere devotee named Ramachandra Puri. And these stories are meant to teach us what to do and what not to do. Haridas Thakur, he teaches us what to do, and Ramachandra Puri teaches us what not to do. So long story short, I'm not going to keep it long since most devotees probably know this story, how Haridas Thakur, he converted from one religion to Krishna consciousness. And one day, the members of his former religion, they says, my dear Haridas Thakur, if you convert back to our religion, there will be no problem for you. But if you don't, then we'll beat you in 22 marketplaces. And Haridas Thakur, he says, my dear brothers, just as the sun has many different names in many different languages, so the one Supreme Lord, he has many different names in many different languages. For whatever reason, he's inspiring me to call him Krishna. And for whatever reason, he is inspiring you to call him another name. But there's no difference, my brothers. They weren't inspired. So they followed their promise. They beat him in 22 marketplaces. However, Lord Chaitanya, he describes that Haridas Thakur, he only saw the good within their heart, which is very surprising, right? Very shocking. So what's the lesson we could take from them? Haridas Thakur was at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong people, but because he had the right mentality, the ocean of Krishna consciousness, he always remained powerful, peaceful, humble, forgiving, etc. So in this way, we could contrast Haridas Thakur with Ramachandra Puri. This story is told in the Anshalila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Long story short, Ramachandra Puri, he had a spiritual master, a guru, named Madhavendra Puri. So one day, Madhavendra Puri was on his deathbed, crying in separation from Krishna and love of Krishna. And so Ramachandra Puri, he was kind of confused because he criticized his guru. He says, my dear Guru Maharaj. Now, can you imagine criticizing your guru publicly in Srimad Bhagavatam? Let's say you criticize your professor at school. What do you think will happen? Any ideas? Unfavorable grades, or you just won't graduate. The worst case scenario. So in this way, he criticizes his guru. Why? Because he says, Guru Maharaj, in the Gita, Krishna says, a wise person laments neither for the living nor for the dead. So why are you crying like a girl? He didn't say that, but basically he essentially said that. He thought he was more enlightened than his guru. Just like children, when they become, 5 years old, they think they're more enlightened than their parents, right? I know everything. That's our situation. So that means we're very immature. The people who have shown us so much mercy, we get a little wisdom, we think we're more enlightened than them. So in this way, he criticizes guru. And it's described because of this guru aparad, it led to Vaishnava aparad. And what is this Vaishnava aparad? That means he couldn't see any good in the Vaishnavas. He even criticized Lord Chaitanya. At this time, Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the time. And one day, Ramachandra Puri, he noticed ants, a lot of ants in Lord Chaitanya's room where he was staying. And he criticized Lord Chaitanya. He says, my dear Lord Chaitanya, I can see that there are many ants in your rooms. But so what does that indicate? Ants only eat sugar. So you must be hiding some glajjwan, some rasagula, some halava, some sweet rice. What kind of sannyasi are you? You must be a pig. You're supposed to be renounced. You must be hiding a lot of sweets. So in this way, he found fault on the Supreme Lord. So what's the lesson we could take from Ramachandra Puri? I could speak for myself. I could relate to Ramachandra Puri a little bit more than Haridasa Kaur, but I'm sure in our own lives we could all relate to Ramachandra Puri. And what's the lesson we could take? He was at the right place, at the right time, with the right people. But because he had the wrong mentality, the land of Maya, what does the land of Maya mean? The land of fault finding, the land of pride, the land of envy, the land of criticizing. When a shark is on land, it's powerless, it's miserable, it's unhappy. So I've never seen anybody who criticizes others and slanders others like me happy. That's why I'm screaming in Bhagavatam. So I'm not very happy. So in this way, we can appreciate that, like Haridasa Kaur, if we can find happiness even among our enemies who hate us, that means we'll be able to find happiness everywhere. Like Ramachandra Puri, if we cannot even find happiness among our friends who love us, that means we won't be able to find happiness anywhere. So therefore, Prabhupada calls this society the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He never called it the Society for Krishna Circumstances. Why? Because we learn from Haridasa Kaur that even if our circumstances aren't perfect, but if our consciousness is perfect, then we always remain happy, content, peaceful. So we learn from Ramachandra Puri that even if our circumstances are practically perfect, but if our consciousness isn't perfect, then we always remain miserable. And so in this way, we can appreciate the difference between what to do and what not to do. And so for the last maybe portion of this class, I'll actually get to the purport. This is only the title, The Prayers of Akrura. So let's examine this purport again. Let's see. So Prabhupada's disciples, they quote a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It says, those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me. In the ultimate sense, any worship of anybody, we're not just referring to demigods. So in this world, who do we generally glorify, honor, or worship? We worship people with Jama, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shribir. Edamana, Madhupama, Naibrahati, Abhidantumvai, Twama, Kinshana, Gochana. Queen Kunti says that materialism generally consists of Jama, aristocratic birth, Aishwarya, riches, Shruta, high education, and Shri, beauty. So generally speaking, in this world, we may become very proud of being honored, glorified, and being worshipped, but we have to be very humble. Why are people honoring and glorifying us? Is it because of our money? Is it because of our beauty, our youth? But suppose that's taken away, and it will be taken away in due course of time. Then see how many followers you have. So we have to be very humble. We shouldn't be very proud that, I have so many followers, I have so many subscribers, I have so many retweets. Yeah, but why do you have it? Be humble. Time humbles everyone, and Krishna humbles everyone. Krishna is time. He says, time I am the great destroyer of the worlds. So in this way, we're not just referring to demigod worship. When we worship anyone, it's really, in a sense, worship of Krishna, but in the wrong way. Why? Prabhupada, I should have wrote the lecture down, but there's a nice particular lecture where Srila Prabhupada is so brilliant. All of his, every time I hear his lectures, it's he's unbelievably, he's talking to a group of scientists. And so he tells one scientist, he says, you are a scientist and you have a good brain, but you cannot manufacture the brain. But who has manufactured your brain? Prabhupada then says, we are glorifying the brain of scientists, but we are not glorifying the scientist who has made the brain of the scientist. So what is Srila Prabhupada saying? He's saying, if we cannot create the brain, then how can we take credit for anything created by the brain? So in this way, worship of scientists, glorifying of scientists is really, in the end, worship of Krishna, but in the wrong way. And so I'll end with this. So since we want to talk about, since there's generally a debate in life, in ISKCON and in life in general, that there's so many pastimes where we have this tendency that we want to take credit for things, just like the sciences. Prabhupada says, my dear sciences, you want to take credit for creating so many things. But he made the fact that we should give all credit to Krishna, because without Krishna's mercy, without his Shakti, then we cannot do anything in this world. So we get ourselves in a lot of trouble when we want to take credit for the things that are mercifully given to us by other devotees and ultimately by Krishna. Prakrite kriyamanayi gunayi karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartarham iti manyate. When we have this ahankar, this false ego that I'm doing so many wonderful things without recognizing that, like Prabhupada said, you cannot even create the brain. So how can you say I'm doing so many wonderful things? This is ultimately done by nature. And nature is controlled by Krishna, so how can you take credit? So when we want to take credit for everything and not give credit to Krishna and other devotees, then we see we'll get ourselves in a lot of trouble. Like Martin Luther King Jr., he says a very nice point in his speech called Drum Major Instinct. He says, nobody is unhappy about praise, even when they know they don't deserve it, and even when they don't believe it. The only people who are unhappy about praise is when that praise is going too much towards somebody else. So in this way, we could see that gets us in a lot of trouble. So there's generally a debate that people have this tendency to want to be praised. But Prabhupada in the Gita, chapter 13, verse 8 through 12, he defines humility. He says in his purport, he says, humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. So why do we want to be honored? We may want to be honored. Why? Above others. Just like we may think, I'm a man, and therefore I'm superior to a woman, my intelligence. We may think, I'm a sannyasi, and I'm superior to householders. But there's a nice verse that says, Bayam pramatasa vaneshu apisiya yatasa ase sahasa sapatnaha jitindiyasya maratya buddhasya griha shramakim nukaroti avadyam. This is one of my favorite verses from the 5th canto, chapter 1, verse 17. It says we cannot consider ourselves a renunciates. Nobody. It says everyone is married. What is the translation? It says, even though a renunciate may travel from forest to forest, he must always fear material bondage because he is sat sapatnaha. He is married to 6 co-wives. And what are those wives? The mind and 5 senses. Manashishtani, Indriyani, Prakritistani, Kashati. Sometimes people think, it's more embarrassing to struggle with lust. But actually, pride gets us in more trouble than lust even, because we could see you could do so many demoniac things, like Durvasa Muni. Because of his pride, he was thinking, So this verse reminds me of the Durvasa Muni pastime. So it basically says that even a renunciate, he travels from forest to forest. He must fear material bondage because he is married to 6 co-wives. However, the second half of the verse, this is very important. It says that even householder life cannot harm a self-satisfied person who is Jatindriya. What does that mean? That means he's divorced from Maya. He's conquered his mind and senses, his ego. Unfortunately, Jatindriya is not with us, and we can see that's what he's done. He's been here for 47 years. And so this pastime, this verse, this is from the 5th canto, chapter 1, verse 17. This pastime, one of my favorite verses, reminds me of the Durvasa Muni and Ambarish pastime. I'm not going to go over the pastime since we're running out of time, but basically we know the pastime where Durvasa Muni is described that he was envious of Ambarish. Now, why is a person envious when somebody receives more praise than him? So Ambarish was known as a great enlightened teacher despite being a great king. And so Durvasa Muni was essentially thinking, I'm a vegetarian, I have saffron, I know all the scriptures by heart, yet people are going to a rich king for wisdom instead of me. This is an outrage. To show how wise I am, I'm going to kill him. Very wise, right? And he's a vegetarian, right? I think the attempted homicide cancels out all the vegetarianism and all the other austerities. So what's the lesson we could take from it? It's very simple in regards to this previous mentioned verse. Although Ambarish was a householder, why was he always happy? Because he was divorced from Maya. Although Durasamuni was a renunciate, why was he always miserable? Because he was married to Maya. So what's the lesson? The lesson is that although it may be easy to divorce our wife, although it may be easy to break up with our girlfriend, and although it may be easy to remain a brahmachari, a single bachelor, but it's not so easy to divorce Maya, even by accepting the dress of a renunciate. And same applies to even people who think, oh, I'm a man, I'm smarter than the women. I'm like, let's analyze this. Let's truly analyze it. Hypothetically speaking, suppose Indra's wife. What was Indra's wife's name? I don't remember. Does anybody remember? I forgot what her name was. Sachi. Yeah, Sachi. Like Lord Chaitanya's mother. Yeah, Sachi. Hypothetically speaking, she probably went up to her husband. My dear Indra, do you think it's wise if you kill all the residents of Vrindavan? I know what I'm talking about, woman. I'm a man. I'm superior. And so what happened? Indra got himself in a lot of trouble. Same with Daksha, who criticized Lord Shiva. Daksha criticized Lord Shiva, why he thought he was superior to him. And it's described even in this chapter of the Bhagavatam, the fourth canto, that even Daksha's wife offered prayers of love and devotion to Lord Vishnu. So hypothetically speaking, Daksha's wife, she probably went up to Daksha, based on how the story is told. She says, my dear Daksha, do you think it's wise to criticize a great soul like Lord Shiva? Not only that, to reject your own daughter who wants to marry Shiva. So it's described that Daksha, he rejected his own daughter, but the mother didn't. My dear Daksha, do you think this is very wise? I know what I'm doing, woman. I'm a man. And what happened? For Daksha's intelligence, he got his head cut off. Yeah, real smart. And it was replaced with the head of a goat. Same with Hiranyakashipu. It's described that the wife of Hiranyakashipu and the mother of Prahlad Maharaj, she submissively listened to Vaishnavas, particularly Narada Muni, very submissively. And hypothetically speaking, she could have told her son, my dear husband, do you think it will be wise to, kill your saintly son by throwing him off a mountain, turning him into a chapati and a pakora by, putting him in fire? And what happened to Hiranyakashipu? He thought, yes, I'm a man, I'm smarter than everyone, I'm a renunciate, etc. And so in this way, we could see that pride gets us in a lot of trouble. So therefore in the Bible, Jesus says, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And so I'll give you one last example it's a very important example, especially in regards to renunciates who are very proud that they're superior to householders. So this is from the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. The chapter is entitled, India Unifying ISKCON. So in this chapter, this whole particular chapter describes that some of Prabhupada's renunciate disciples, they told Prabhupada, do you think the householders should have a position of leadership in ISKCON? I mean, they're married, they're how can they have a leadership position? We're renounced, so that means essentially we're superior. So Prabhupada quoted an essential verse. He says, Kiba vipra kiba niyasi suja kene noa jay Krishna tapa veta se guru hoy. That anyone who knows the science of Krishna, and that means the science of humility, we have to be humble, then that person can be, it says guru, and of course that can mean many things, diksha, shiksha, or even the word gurus kind of have a superior kind of connotation, but anyone could just share others. You could share wisdom with others. You could be a mentor. And it doesn't matter, what your nationality, your creed, your color, or whatever your background is. So Prabhupada was explaining this to the sannyasis. And Prabhupada thought he had settled the matter. But finally, one sannyasi, he wanted to get one last lick in to establish his superiority over the householders. So he quoted a pastime from Sachi Gopal, where he says, Prabhupada, if this Brahmana was really a pure devotee, why did he allow the Sachi Gopal deity to come all the way to his village to see him get married. How come he just didn't remain a brahmachari or become a renunci, you know? So Prabhupada could understand his motive. And there was a group of devotees around. And so Prabhupada, this is one reason why we should be humble. This is very important. One reason why we should be very humble. So Prabhupada told this sannyasi, I never heard of him, I'm not going to mention his name, but I never heard of him. Maybe he left the movement after Prabhupada embarrassed him. Prabhupada says, he said, just because no woman wanted you, you say that nobody should get married. He says this is called the sour grapes philosophy. No woman wanted you, you're forced to be a celibate, a sannyasi, so therefore you say nobody should get married. So in this way, all the devotees started to laugh at this disciple. And so in this way, when we're too proud of being superior to others, then we should expect a reaction for it. It doesn't matter how powerful we are or how powerful we think we are. And as explained before, we can always be humbled by God, or in this particular case, the spiritual masters. So the lesson we could take from this is that, if we're connected to God, then we can do anything. And if we're not connected to God, then we can't do anything. So it doesn't matter whether you're a woman, a man, whatever your nationality, your creed or color. If we're giving Krishna Shakti, the Guru's mercy, Krishna Shakti, then we could spread Krishna consciousness to whomever and wherever Krishna desires. Kali Kaleta Dharma, Krishna Nama Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahedtara Pravartana. This verse from Anjalila, chapter 7, verse 11, it says when one is empowered by Krishna Shakti Vina, the empowerment of Krishna, then that person can spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're a child. We chant the verse every day, Mukam Karoti Vachanam, Pangulang Gayate Gidam. And so the last point I'll share, it says two very important points. It says, surround yourself with the dreamers and the doers, the believers and the thinkers, but most of all, surround yourself with those who see the greatness within you, even when you don't see it in yourself. And this is precisely what Prabhupada gave his disciples. He says, yes, there are greatness within you, even though the Brahmanas, the Smarta Brahmanas, the ritualistic Brahmanas of India do not see you. From a quote-unquote understandable point of view, you come from a very hellish background. But still, because Krishna is situated within your heart, Krishna can perform miracles through anyone. And so here's my last statement. Martin Luther King, he says the same thing. He says something very inspirational. He says, even if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should go out and sweep streets like Michelangelo painted, like Beethoven composed music, like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know about Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't even have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. You can be that servant. Jivera Swarup Hoy Krishneta Nityadas Krishneta Tatata Shakti Beta Abhay Prakash. The only title we need to feel good about ourselves is Krishna Das, the servant of Krishna. And so there's a last statement. It says, money, fame, and power will increase your net worth, not your self-worth. You were already valuable with the smaller apartment and no title behind your name. The only title we need to feel good about ourselves is Krishna Das, servant of Krishna. So anyway, that's our discussion today. Thank you. I'm sure I probably fried everyone out, so but I appreciate that. Are there any criticism, commentaries, reflections? Yes. Jaya. Yes, Leela Mandri, thank you for coming to class. And I'm very grateful for your kind words and encouragement over the last few days. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for encouraging me to come to the class. Mm-hmm. Usually I just try to wrap up everything inside, and that takes me a long time. But it was very nice of you. And I knew that I needed a lot of prayers before hearing your class. Now I'm more convinced that I need many, many more prayers. And I really like the point that you made about criticizing devotees and staying humble. I think that's the core principle in Krishna consciousness that keeps a devotee close to Krishna. The devotees of the Lord are very, very dear to the Lord. And because they're human, we can still see their defects. And they have defects. It's not that they don't have defects, but once we start looking and focusing on those defects and forget how close they are to Krishna and how dear they are to Krishna, there is always this chance that they will not fall down, but we will fall down. And that's probably one of the biggest lessons we can learn in our own Krishna consciousness, because this happens all the time. So, thank you.
Jai, thank you. Very nice points. I'd like to share one last thing about Leela Manjari. Thank you for coming. Among the devotees here, I think I've known Leela Manjari the longest, probably. So Leela Manjari did it all. She did book distribution. She would even go with us on book distribution to all the hippie festivals where all the people were doing drugs and everything. But when Krishna Smarana Prabhu left with this group, all the devotees had to do pujari work. So she's been doing it ever since. But she definitely does pretty much all the services in this morning, Mridanga and Kirtan. And one of the most important things Prabhupada says is we have to hear about the Lord. Otherwise, what else we hear about? We're going to hear our own minds. So Leela Manjari is, for the last 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, has been leading a women's group. I was actually asked to join by Ruchi Mataji. I've heard a few of her classes. But every day for the last few years, despite whether it's a lot of people or a little people, she continues to lead this Krishna Katha group. And that's one of the most important things. Anyone can show, basically, we see Prabhupada in his own life. It's kind of similar to Prabhupada. Anyone can show what they're made of when everyone's watching. But the true testament of sincerity is to show what we're made of when no one is watching. And so we can see that in Leela Manjari. Hopefully she'll take the opportunity to give Srimad Bhagavatam class. And we're petitioning other devotees, please take this opportunity. Subal, he's inviting other devotees in our congregation. Please take this opportunity to share your realizations. And there's so many devotees in our community who have so many profound realizations, like Leela Manjari, she shared one of them. So hopefully she'll take the opportunity to share an entire class. So anyway, if there's not anything else, then we'll end right here before Subal throws me off the VSS. All right, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thank you. I ended on time. I was looking at the time. 10, 9, 8.